These works Huss read with interest. He believed their author to be a sincere Christian and was inclined to regard with favor the reforms which he had advocated. Already, though he knew it not, Huss had entered upon a path which was to lead him far away from Rome. After this time, there arrived in Prague 2 strangers from England, men of learning, who had received the light and had come to spread it in this distant land. Beginning with an open attack on the Pope's supremacy, they were soon silenced by the authorities, but they were unwilling to relinquish their purposes. They had a recourse, and they used other measures. Being artists as well as preachers, they proceeded to exercise their skill. In a place open to the public, they drew 2 pictures. One represented the entrance of Christ into Jerusalem. Your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, Matthew 21:5, followed by his disciples in travel-worn garments with naked feet. The other picture portrayed a pontifical procession. The Pope, arrayed in his rich robes and triple crown, mounted upon a horse, magnificently adorned, preceded by trumpeters, and followed by cardinals and prelates in dazzling array. This was a most powerful sermon which arrested the attention of all classes. Crowds came to stare at the drawings. Many were deeply overcome by the contrast between the meekness and the humility of Christ and the pride and the arrogance of the Pope. There was great commotion in Prague, and the strangers, after a time, found it necessary for their own safety to depart. But the lesson they had taught was not forgotten. The pictures made a deep impression on the mind of Huss and led him to a closer study of the Bible and of the writings of Wycliffe. Though he was not prepared to accept all of the reforms advocated by Wycliffe, he saw more clearly the true character of the papacy. With greater zeal, he denounced the pride, the ambition, and the corruption of the hierarchy. Up till now, Huss had stood alone in his labors, but now Jerome, who while in England had accepted the teachings of Wycliffe, joined him. And the two were from then on united in their lives and even in their death. While Jerome debated in the schools, Huss expounded the scriptures in his chapel or plugged away with his pen, refuting some manifesto of the doctors of the university or some edict of the Vatican. John Huss studied his Bible. He read the early fathers. He compared these with what he saw was going on in the church, and he concluded that the church had departed far from her early model, not in practice only, but in doctrine also. On November the 1st, 1414, a general council was convoked in the city of Constance, and Huss was summoned to appear. Prior to his departure, Huss was given a letter of safe conduct that read, "We recommend to you with a full affection, to all in general, and to each in particular, the Honorable Master John Huss, Bachelor in Divinity and Master of Arts, the bearer of these presents, journeying from Bohemia to the Council of Constance, whom we have taken under our protection and safeguard, and under that of the empire, enjoining you to receive him and treat him kindly, furnishing him with all that shall be necessary to speed and assure his journey, as well by water as by land, without taking anything from him or his at coming in or going out, for any sort of duties whatsoever, and calling on you to allow him to pass, sojourn, stop, and return freely and securely, providing him, even if necessary, with good passports for the honor and respect of the imperial majesty, given at Spires this 18th day of October of the year 1414, the 3rd of our reign in Hungary, and the 5th of that of the Romans." On the 26th day after his arrival, Huss was arrested in flagrant violation of the imperial safe conduct and carried before the Pope and the cardinals. After a conversation of some hours, he was told that he must remain a prisoner and was entrusted to the clerk of the Cathedral of Constance. Weakened by illness and imprisonment, Huss was at last brought before the council. Loaded with chains, he stood in the presence of the emperor. During his long trial, he firmly maintained the truth, and in the presence of the assembled dignitaries of the church and state, he uttered a solemn and faithful protest against the corruptions of the hierarchy. When required to choose whether he would recant his doctrines or suffer death, he accepted the martyr's fate. Huss was taken to the place of his execution. A chain was passed around his neck. He spoke, "It is thus that you silence the goose, but 100 years hence there will arise a swan whose singing you shall not be able to silence." The fire was applied. The flames blazed upward. John Huss began to sing with a loud voice, "Jesus, thou Son of David, have mercy on me." The death of Huss had not resulted as the papists had hoped. The council determined, instead of burning Jerome, to force him, if possible, to recant. He was brought before the assembly and offered the alternative to recant or to die at the stake. Death at the beginning of his imprisonment would have been a mercy in comparison with the terrible sufferings which he had already undergone. But now, weakened by illness and by the rigors of his prison house, and by the torture and the anxiety and the suspense, separated from his friends and disheartened by the death of Huss, Jerome's fortitude gave way, and he consented to submit to the council. He pledged himself to adhere to the Catholic faith and accepted the action of the council in condemning the doctrines of Wycliffe and Huss. In the solitude of his dungeon, he saw more clearly what he had done. He thought of the courage and the fidelity of Huss, and in contrast, he pondered upon his own denial of the truth. He thought of the divine Master whom he had pledged himself to serve, and who for his sake had endured the death of the cross. To escape a brief period of suffering, he would not deny his Lord, and on the 30th of May, 1416, Jerome was brought to receive his sentence. When the fire began to burn, Jerome with a loud voice began to sing, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commit my spirit." As the flame waxed fiercer and rose higher, and the martyr felt its scorching heat, he was heard to cry out in the Bohemian language, "O Lord God, Father Almighty, have mercy upon me, and be merciful unto mine offenses, for thou knowest how sincerely I have loved thy truth."